There, everybody. Got everyone fine? All right. Reconvene. Thank you. And we'll go to item 2.5. Welcome, Lorna, and we're going to think about the new sustainability and committee structure and appointment. So we'll take the report as read and ask Lorna to.
Kia ora koutou. I just wanted to mention in the report, now that the council's adopted its mission and vision, I think we need to just change one of the words to the coromandel instead of our coromandel. And also in there it says $200,000 for the committee. That an error. What happened was that if you recall, when we first discussed committee structures, we were going to have a committee and 2 subcommittees.
Yeah.
And then with the annual plan configurations, we reduced that budget. So it's actually 100,000 in there. A couple of other points I think is 100,000.
Just to clarify, that was actually to ensure that we had sufficient staffing in the governance area to actually support the growing governance.
It's about
It's directly related to that now.
Sure.
Through the
You right with that, Lorna?
So in the annual plan, we did also have is 200,000 for sustainability resilience implementation part of this brand new staff member that we've just been advertising for. So that's an operational budget that sits separately to the budget of the committee.
Yes, that's right. A couple of things just with this committee. I just want to say that because it's a new committee, it is going to take a little bit of time to get the work program going. We already have some projects and program works that we can start bringing to that committee if it is adopted. The Emergency Management Committee did start in the previous training, and that committee would meet quarterly, and we did find that the meetings didn't take up a lot of time, roughly about an hour and a half to 2 hours, just specifically on emergency management items. So building into the capability of some of the other programs of work in this terms of reference, we'll see this in this fuller committee. In terms of effectiveness, at the moment it says it meets at least 4 times a year, but if required, we can make that more meetings if we need to, so that we can build in if we need to more from the beginning.
So can I? Sorry.
Yep. So I also just want to caveat this. So while chunks of this, the functions post this committee do have some resourcing attached to it, i.e. we have Gary Towler and we have some things, what we're a bit short there too, aren't we, Gary? But anyway, we do have some capability in that area. The bit around community outcomes and community development, we're pretty light in that area. And so given that you've just adopted your activities, that includes for the first time community development. So that will be given effect to when the LTP is signed off next year, assuming you keep it through that process. In the meantime, we have actually done a little bit of resourcing through our recovery budgets to get some staff in here funded by recovery funds, but they're really focused on recovery. And the aspiration I have is that those staff will then sort of jump over into BAU, but the recovery stuff will become BAU and sit under this committee. But I just wanted to flag at the beginning, as we bed this in, we will be light on resources, which means there's just need to manage the expectations about the size of the work program that we're actually going to be able to manage under this committee.
So I'm going to move that we receive the board. Can I get a seconder for that? For receiving. Debbie, those in favour?
Aye.
Okay. Anything further to add, Laura? Okay, so we'll open this for discussion, but no, you've opened for discussion now on the rest of the items of the resolution. So any comments?
Yeah, my just comments, could you just explain a little bit how the committee works? Like, do they just pick some of these projects and off they go, or do they have some committees to run them, or how's it going to work? That's just some direction.
Good question. So I may ask Aileen to give us an overview of what we're capable of doing in the
Yep. So what I guess, if you think of the Audit Risk Committee, so the Audit Risk Committee has a champion in Paku, and Paku manages the work program that sits under that. In this instance, Lorna is going to be that person. So Lorna becomes the champion for the committee, a little bit like the CE is for
Yeah.
council.
Yeah.
And the work will predominantly be done in Lorna's growing but still lightly resourced area. And Gary will be probably one of the main contributors into the committee with civil defence. And in the meantime, until we actually manage to resource up a bit better.
And just to carry on, if I can, through the chair, well, that committee, you're asking everybody to be on the committee, I understand, is that right?
At the moment, that is the proposed framework, but that is open for discussion.
So if we're all at the committee, then we don't need to bring it to council, or is there still going to be a report to council from this committee?
It's still a council. So delegations of the committee. So let me just clarify as it stands at the moment. I have asked Rika and Robin to co-chair this committee. Had discussions with them. At the moment, they are very happy to do that. And I'm very aware that the scope of this committee is huge. This is a monster.
Yeah.
There's a massive scope of work that we're trying to address here. And part of that is that we don't have the resources to go multiple committees, which is what we were originally hoping to do. We've got to be realistic about what we can do, and we've also got to pace ourselves. We've got to stage our way through these areas that we're trying to work in and achieve the outcomes for our communities. We can't do everything at once, and it takes a lot of collaboration, a lot of working together. And also a big part of that is going to be being realistic about the different challenges in different parts of the district, which is, I think, where we're well placed. We've got Rika co-chairing and Robin co-chairing on different sides of the district, but it's going to take input from all of us.
So just another clarification if I can. So the civil defence and emergency management role in there will be important. I really appreciate that. And obviously that road recovery information will flow through that committee. So I see that as being one of the key objectives out of this. I think it's fantastic. That part of it.
So that's a good point, and thank you for raising that. And I think one of the things that's really important is that we've already got some skill sets across the rest of the council. We've got John, who is our delegate for the Civil Defence Emergency Management Waikato region. And that role is really important to be the basic council at that committee and feed that information through into this resilience and sustainability committee, which the name really should be broader than that, but there's a limit. We've also got John Morrissey working with myself on regional and transport, so that's important to feed into the work that we're doing here. We've got yourself working in that public transport area. I'd really like to have further discussions with Peter around economic development and getting a focus on that. And I know it's an area that you're really interested in. So I think we've got more discussions to have in that area. And Delhi is currently on the Hauraki Golf Forum. We're looking at Martin taking on the role of Hauraki Rail Trail because Strat Peters is going to be stepping down. So there's a number of things that we need to discuss more and get some support underneath this committee, but it will be done in such a way that we're working to support the committee because we can't afford to have a whole bunch of committees independent from this. We just don't have the resources for this. Yeah.
I think it's important to note that in terms of reference, it's a minimum 5 councillors. So if people did have a workload, we might just have to talk between ourselves and see who's going to attend that meeting to make sure that it's following their core. But, you know, understandably, not everyone can make it, then should still work with 5 people.
And if I can have another clarification. So how long will this meeting be? If you start to look at those projects there, that's going to suck up a lot of time. how are we going to do this? We're going to take sections of them and just meet those, say 3 or 4 that are relevant, or are you going to have everybody speak to these differently at the meeting? How's that structure going to happen?
So that's getting into a level of details that I'm pretty much going to leave to the chairs to sort that out. I think it's a bit premature to have those discussions because this is all new. And as I said to you, the scope of this is quite broad. One of the things that we might need to consider is the frequency of meetings, and that's already been flagged. Quarterly at the moment doesn't feel like it's enough.
Ah.
So I'm interested to hear from councillors as to what they think about that and whether we need to look at having those more frequently. And just bear in mind that it does cover off quite a number of the things that we're talking about in other areas, and it formalises those areas of work as well.
Through the chair, can I also maybe just give reference to risk and assurance? If you look at some of Parker's reports and, health and safety is one that really talks about the nasty 9. And so there's a prioritisation of those 9 and what would take precedent. That would be the similar thing with some of the priorities of the work programme is what would be prioritised for this committee as, some of the top issues that we need to start looking at.
It's a couple of other things that we all need to be aware of as the council too. And one is that the direction that we are, I'm going to use the word forced, it's probably not the right word, but the direction that we're being guided in or mandated in terms of future local government basically sends us in this direction anyway. There's still quite a lot of uncertainty, but if we talk to members of current government and members of the opposition about the future for local government, it was an independent panel that prepared that document. It wasn't a government document, so it's unlikely that if we get a change of government, that it will be thrown in the bin. I think there will be a change in the way that things are done, and that change is heading in this direction. So this prepares us for a new way that councils do their business. Whether it lines us up entirely to the direction for local government, we don't know, and that is certainly a hot topic at the moment. And there is still a huge amount of uncertainty about what local government is going to look like after October, into next year and the years ahead. So this helps us, it prepares us to line ourselves up for what we think might be the future for local government activities. Martin?
So I just wanted to check, it's on page 125, it's got committees delegated following powers act. It said review and monitor climate resilience, emergency response and civil defence plans and programs and work. But I don't see anywhere in here where there is where it's saying how that climate resilient plan is going to be created. In our previous term, we had a small group called the Sustainability and Resilience Group, which for various reasons, nothing really happened with that group. So what I think might be a useful thing, I don't know whether we have to have it in this terms of reference, is the ability to create a subcommittee. Is that something that, that people agree with, and whether it's something that needs to be written in here, or is that something that could be decided at the first meeting?
So I'm probably going to ask Aileen to give us some guidance on what we might not be able to do in terms of resources, or whether that is a staging process, or I'm really conscious of not overloading or trying to ask for things that we don't have the capacity to do.
Okay, so just on that, I think we intended to make a small amendment, and we were in time emissions reduction into the terms of reference.
Yeah.
So my view, it's probably worth getting the committee up and running and having a discussion with the chairs down the track a little bit. We are advertising at the moment for that climate change advisor. And so that position will be super important in supporting the work program. But I think we've got to get the committee up and running first, do the prioritisation that was discussed previously, and then work out what it might be that operates under this committee. I guess I'd just like to flag that we've got to be careful this doesn't become so big that it should just be council.
Yeah.
And so we do need to be quite clear about what actually comes here and what goes straight to council. And I'd also just flag that sometimes, and particularly in the civil defence and recovery area, we might find that things are so urgent and can't come through this committee, and they have to go straight to council because, 6 weeks leading into this plus 6 weeks to get to council is a 12-week delay. So we just have to be clear that sometimes we're going to short circuit this and take stuff straight to council for fast decision.
Right.
I'm struggling with a number of things to do with this. And to me, it has a whole feel about just a level of bureaucracy that we just don't need, because we already have a council. And the council is responsible for all of the things that are contained in this. And why don't we just manage that through the normal process of council rather than having to set up a separate committee to do this? I'm just really sort of struggling if it's cost and resourcing that we're limiting this rather than having a group of subcommittees or committees that we've had before. Then why aren't we just addressing this? All of these things are really important and are core issues that really need to be addressed. And the double layer here is something that I'm really sort of struggling to understand. And to me, it would make more sense to have this as part of the council operations and to maybe have special meetings of the council to focus on these areas rather than have a committee separate to it that then reports back to the same people 6 weeks later. So, to me, again, trying to keep things simple, it would just seem logical to me to make sure that there's more structure around this and it just becomes part of the operations of council. I'm also very aware that I've made the request on a few occasions now that we need to have councillors together on and off site to be able to talk about things, and particularly these additional areas which have probably been under-focused rather than receive the focus that they have. If we're looking at putting the structure in place before we've had the opportunity of having that discussion amongst ourselves in an informal way. So, my preference would be to see this as just part of core council operations rather than a separate committee.
Thank you, John. So just to clarify, it's fairly standard practice in councils across the country to have committee structures in place. And it's one of the discussions that we had, and it was clearly identified to me that as Mayor, one of your first jobs when you take on the role is to look at committee structures. And those committee structures form an important part of the preparation work that needs to be done on specific focus areas before they come to full council. And so when we as a council first had the discussion, it was clearly identified that there was a need for a desire for an economic development committee, housing committee, certainly community resilience and sustainability, emissions, cultural and community outcomes. There was a clear desire from councillors for those committee structures so that before it came to council, the work was done, the prep was done together with staffing resources. Trying to get this volume of work into full council meetings in the frequency that we've got and with the time that we've got available for council meetings would be a challenge. We meet every 6 weeks as a full council. We've already got a pretty full agenda and then workshops normally following that. So even though this is starting life as a committee with full council, I think that's a decision that we need to make. Should it be leaner than that? So that basically the committee can get on with the work and come to council with prep already done and looking for decisions on the work that they've done in preparation for council. So I'm interested to hear what other councillors. Sorry, Kerry.
Can I just respond to that? Because I fully understand and support what you're saying in regard to what it's trying to achieve. Where that breaks down is that we're still bringing all of those areas together into one pot. You know, if this was separate groups looking at economic development, looking at housing, I'd have a better understanding as to why we were needing to do this. But you know, it is still the full council, and it needs to be because of the breadth of the topics that are on the table here. And it would seem far more effective to have that, and you're still meeting, whether this is a committee or it's council, you're still having to meet to do these things. So you still have to put that in. It just means it'll speed up the process further if it's a council meeting rather than a committee that then reports back to the same people to progress things.
So if I pick off one example of housing, we look at housing as a specific focus and we bring that to a committee structure. At the moment, we don't have a housing policy or a housing strategy. A committee could, or even a working group, an informal working group below that committee could basically do all the preparation on that, put together the framework of a housing strategy so that when it comes to council, councillors can sign off on that, knowing that there's all groundwork has been done. If we try and do all of that at council level all the way through, I think we'll very quickly hit the wall in terms of our capabilities. That's my thoughts, but I'm really interested to hear what other councillors think.
Following on from what John's saying, I think that's originally what we wanted the co-hub to be like, was that, say, you have people like Peter and John who've expressed an interest in economic development, meeting with the EU team and having those conversations, and then bringing back initiatives and ideas to the full council. Argument is that you need a whole lot of staff support to do that. If it's a formal committee, I suppose you do, but if it's an informal brief or portfolio, do you need all of that staffing built around it? So I hear what John's saying, you know, that you know, if it was Peter Revel, John, ED team, we're looking into that economic development stuff and bringing it back to full council, is that not more efficient?
Thing is, personally, I think it's going to be a mixture of those things. You know, the informal work, but then if you're looking at bringing that to a committee, a formal committee, for example, if I come back to housing, a formal committee can get the wheels turning on a needs analysis, for example, and get all that prep done, get the report that can come to, first of all, the committee, and then the committee goes through it and get presentations and input from outside sources, and then bring that to full council. If we try to do that, full council, I think on our 6-weekly cycle, the agenda on full council Mondays would be very, very overloaded very quickly. And that's why I think councils have committee structures in place. We have probably the fewest number of committees of just about any council in the country.
Well, that's often.
And yes, they add a level of bureaucracy. Probably not the right thing to use, but it's a standard format for councils to do that prep before things come to council.
Yeah, so I'd just like to bounce off something that John said. You know, if I look at page 123, so let me step back a bit. I too have issues with this on a number of reasons, and I have three around that. But if I look on page 123, sustainability, wellbeing, community outcomes, the areas of focus are, and there's a shopping list there, which is massive. Housing need, you know, we've all talked about housing need. So we're talking about sport and active recreation, community resilience, you know, et cetera, et cetera. There's just truckloads of stuff. And I sit there and think, there's more on this than anybody can say grace over. You know, it needs to be, in my view, more focused. And I feel that we're ending up looking at this without us as a council actually having workshopped it. What do we want this committee to look like, and so on. At the outset, so there's an issue there. I think, once again, we're a collaborative district, and I feel that we're looking at something here which hasn't resulted as it ended up as a result of collaboration around the table. When I look at our original, it's called, it hasn't got a title, but you know what I'm talking about. We had the SMP Sustainability and Resilience Committee, which included SMP Sustainability Resilience to include the previous Emergency Management Committee. And then we had the proposition of the second one, which was affordable housing and social equity. Kind of, okay. And sort of thought, oh, well, maybe those two come together. But this is way broader than that. And if I look at the terms of reference that points to that, this ends up being a much, much broader. Also, the Mayor's public statement last week, where, quote, "I'm also pleased to say that our council is about to establish a new standing committee on sustainability and resilience. Once formally adopted, the committee will be responsible for the development and overview of strategic policy and plans essential to fostering resilient, empowered and safe communities, which fulfills an election promise that I made last year, the Mayor. It's a broad remit covering assessing housing need, youth development, employment and education, positive ageing, community safety, creative and cultural support." I mean, this is a feast of things that I feel this is just, we're committed to failure, or committed to, in 2 years' time or 3 years' time or whatever it is, looking and saying, well, yeah, we've done the emergency management and we've got SMP going, but we're missing out on everything else. And I think we're creating expectations potentially with public statements and creating a committee which with a remit that's way too big, and I struggle with that.
Okay, so thank you, Peter. I stand by the statement. I think if, as a council and as a mayor, there is an expectation that having gone into an election campaign, you make some commitments about what you want to see happen and what you want to try and achieve. And then there's an expectation that you get on with the job. And so I remain committed to trying to move forward with achieving those aims. And you and I have had that discussion ourselves about having that vision, that future direction. And I see this fitting perfectly with what we've agreed on and what we've developed. So it is an ambitious remit, you're not wrong. And it is ambitious because we don't have the capacity to break it down into smaller committees and still have the resources and the staffing available for those smaller committees. What we can do, and I'm aware that this has come in at fairly short notice in terms of the councillors seeing the framework of this and then today's council meeting. I'm perfectly happy to hear discussion about moving it to the September meetings so that councillors have a chance to talk it through and get some more discussion and some more clarity on the framework of what it should look like. It's kicking the can down the road a little bit, but in terms of having the discussion with councillors, I'm perfectly satisfied with that, if that's what you prefer. So we'll go to John and then Terry.
You know, it's a pretty big committee and a lot of responsibility with it. I think it deserves to be a separate committee because there's no way I want to deal with all this stuff at a council meeting, nor council matters, or after a council meeting, which we'll discuss this. And I'd just like to point out that Len actually has the mandate and the authority to decide what committees he wants around the council table. It helps with the councils as such. So I want to do it by consensus, Len, but it is your mandate. I'm quite happy to try it, give it a go, see where it leads. I think there's probably a need for it. So I don't see the need for us to discuss it if Len wants it. Right. Heather, yes, sorry.
Terry. Thank you.
Yeah, I'm just gonna put out some points that I feel we need to discuss is are we aligning ourselves with the government changes in October? This is a local government review that was independently done. And it was based on a little bit about what Labor government was trying to put in, and I can see the direction and where it goes. But if there is a government change, will those objectives still be there for us to focus on, or will they not be? That's where I was concerned about structuring this up straight away. I think the idea is to get it into place, get the feeling of it. But if things change, that we can change to suit whatever the future is going to be. Which I don't know what it is.
Let me just clarify that. The future for local government was an independent, it wasn't a Labor thing. That was
Independent, yeah.
clear part of the brief from them is that we are doing this and it's one of many. It's been done before. Most of them are still sitting on the shelf or somewhere in Wellington. But having discussed this, not just with current government members, but also with opposition members, they welcome that, and certainly at local government New Zealand level, there is a critical awareness that the current model for local government isn't working. There's major issues with everything from the length of term, 3-year to 4-year term, the funding models, a number of other things, including regional planning capabilities. So there's an awareness that things need to change in local government, and this is not a Labor government thing. This is an independent panel, which seems to have support from both sides. And that's why I made the comment that this lines us up and prepares us to some degree. Nobody knows what's going to happen in October.
So that question, because the next question is around funding for this. Because we know that we can't do this alone. We know that we're talking about a lot of stuff that outside agencies do in some respect, and we don't need to engage with how they work their business. And it has to have a tag to it. So the government, incoming government, if it supports it, it might find the money. If it supports it to a degree, it might find some money, not so much money. So these all are great things to happen, but they do need a funding model package around them. Otherwise, we're going to struggle to engage with those community services to get this thing done. That's what I feel.
It's a good point, and it goes to the core of many of those discussions in Wellington. But one of the things that has become perfectly evident to me in terms of what councils are trying to do and the outcomes that they're trying to achieve is those councils that have done the homework and prepared in advance are lined up for outside funding and more likely to get it. Projects that they've specifically identified as what their communities want. The ones that haven't done the homework don't get the funding because the funding goes to people that know what they want to achieve for their communities. So, and that's a big part of, I think, where we need to be as a council, and it's been proven again and again. Go your project, get the homework done, get the feasibility done, get your business case done. Even if you haven't got the funding, you're well placed to achieve that. Whether that funding model is still one is, and again, a lot of discussion around that because the single point of agreement across local government is that the funding model where the government gets most of the money and councils get not much is unsustainable into the future. And that's something that all councils agree on. And even talking to Simon Watts yesterday, who was the shadow spokesman for national and local government, he said exactly the same thing. Current funding model is not working. We need to be looking at it. So, Gary,
What I was going to say, I did attend some meetings when you spoke to the election campaign, and I have to say that I vaguely remember these, but there was also looking at the contracting out and various other things. But what's happened since then, of course, we've had Gabriel, and we're in a different climate. And I think when I look at this, although they're very good ideas and excellent, we're in a situation where the top priorities are really needing to get this place back and operating. And there are a lot of people out there, as you know, who don't need me to tell you. And I just wonder how much that's going to help them. And that's why possibly a further discussion about this, you say, December or sometime, might be helpful, because is there any way we can do anything to add to this to help get back to where we were or assist doing that? I'm not sure. It seems to me that the list has got merit, but in the current state we're in, is it, can we work it?
thank you. So just to comment on that, Gary, there isn't a day goes by when we as a council are not focused on what we need to do in their public space. It has occupied us since the beginning of January, all day, every day. But out of that, we as a council still have a responsibility to think about the vision and what our future and what our communities should look like. And we've also got opportunities in front of us. So if we look at the planning of our districts and what they look like going forward, we have responsibilities for urban planning and design, which are coming up as part of the RMA reforms. Regional spatial planning is a discussion that happens all the time amongst other councils and amongst regional council. We have opportunities that are being presented to us with some of the recovery resources that were not there before. And I might ask Galen, because you're over this stuff more than I am, but you know, you're a big fan of making the most out of the opportunity that's presented itself. Can you see some opportunities that we maybe didn't have before?
So I think this is a political debate. So I think this is really needed for the councillors to discuss. I just reiterate, and I'm going to agree slightly with Gary in that at the moment, actually recovery is our focus and is our priority. And I just reiterate the challenge with this community going forward is actually how we resource the work program. That's not to say we can't resource bits of it, but I just wanted the expectations managed on what this committee can actually achieve in the coming 9 months until we have an LTP in place. So I think that's probably where I need to start.
So we've got to pace ourselves. We've got to, take it step by step.
I think that prioritisation is really, really important because in my thinking and, acknowledging that we have had this awful summer and awful weather and, all this other kind of stuff. And, I think housing is very important and I don't want to downplay the need for people to have a safe, dry place to live. But unless we're tackling our emissions, we're not doing anything to stop the weather that's causing all the problems that we're having on the roads. And so my priority would be, and I recognise that I'm in a very privileged position. I do have a roof over my head and a driveway that works and fall down and, I can access my property, all that kind of stuff. And so I am in a privileged position to say this. And mission production is a very important part of where I think this committee needs to be working.
I think, sorry,
It's, so in terms of the areas of focus, there are several listed there on page 123. And very early on, should this committee be approved today, those areas of focus need to be agreed on by full council in terms of what we're going to focus on. Because as David said, we don't have infinite resources to be able to do everything if that would potentially be great for this committee to achieve. Lorna said it at the very beginning, actually. Also.
and I think those are really good points. Some of the stuff that's on this list of stuff is stuff that we're doing anyway, like we've got this. The work that we're doing in that SM space dovetails with what's going on here. Housing, for example, and regional planning is stuff that we as a council are required to do anyway. What this does, I think, help us to do is focus those energies and get back to our communities and find out what. And there's been quite a lot of discussion already amongst the councils about the need for spatial planning at a district level. Lorna and her team have done the Thames spatial plan, but I'm hearing from councillors all the time, we need this for Holland, we need this for Lincoln Bay. Coromandel, I'm not sure whether there's such a drive and a push, but in terms of urban planning, I'm hearing from councillors all the time that we've got to be focused on these things, and it's got to be part of what we do as council. Rika.
So, I think potentially what I'm hearing is the breadth of the portfolio of this committee is potentially what's got people concerned. I look at something like recovery, and I would pull that out, and that would be part of council. That's our focus today. That's what we've been focused on for the last 9 months or 8 months, and as we go forward. So just in the essence of time, is there potentially sort of some workshop time that we can grab before September's meeting to go through and perhaps just look at the remit of this and bring this back? It's huge. It's really huge. And I think if we're going to have a committee, let's set it up properly. Let's set it up to succeed. What is it that we want to look at? We are going to have to prioritise. We can't be everything to everybody. We can't deliver everything. That's, from a staff perspective, from a financial perspective, from us as a team of governors as well. We're going to have to sit down in a room and have a conversation about our priorities and what it is that we want to achieve. And then maybe that will help shape this. I feel like creating something that is bigger than Ben-Hur and potentially too big to manage or essentially will fail because there's not the right scope behind it. I'm a bit concerned about that. So I'd like to suggest we park it to a very, very near workshop date. It could be just an informal Teams meeting with the 10 of us online. And, we have a conversation and peel it back, make it manageable, repackage it, come to September, boom.
Thank you. So just in terms of potential timing and structure for that, we do have 29th of August workshop, but I don't know if the team will have to advise me whether we've got scope and capacity in that date to be able to look at this or not. So Barry's saying,
Yeah.
we'll make it work. We'll make it work. All right. So 29th of August, what's the date of the council meeting is 20th of
It's 19.
19th of September. All right. So that might work. Before I go to Peter, I just want to circle back to what John said about the mayor's got the mandate to do this. I've never been in the business of forcing things on council, so I just want to clarify that. I do want this to work. I do see this as a way for us to move forward, but I do want councillors to have a discussion about it at the same time.
But I just caveat the fact that the 29th is very full and it's full of stuff that's LVP and time bound. So yeah, be prepared to have a long day. Or we might have to.
Well, through the chair, councillor Kitty Crucible's suggestion about the team's meeting, get a better place. That discussion.
I think it's a good idea, and perhaps this question. So we've just talked about the SMP, you know, where we have a project, shoreline management project, which has a governing body sitting over it. That then reports to council. Does that mean, how would the SMP change, or the process around the SMP and the governing body and everything like that change under this structure?
So I don't think the SNP is actually mentioned in here because we had exactly that debate with staff and we couldn't see the point of taking it through a committee to go to council. So after debating the merits of it, we were of the view it should just be put straight to council.
Okay.
But I guess the wider argument to that is that there are so many crossovers between SMP and what we're doing, what we're trying to achieve here. And that's one of the things that we need to clarify and discuss to make sure that we're dovetailing everything together.
So, and just I support what Rick was saying. I think the idea of us spending some time workshopping this would be helpful. Help both for an understanding of how it exactly would work, and secondly, to agree on those things that are really important, so that the chairs, you know, or you know, when it comes into fruition, chairs have an clearly understanding that actually these are the things that are in there. Because
All right, so let's agree that we need to workshop. Martin?
Yeah, and I think also, I don't like keep going back about comms, but I think the communication around this is very important. I don't see how there is short-term things in here that are going to necessarily help our businesses over the next 8 or 9 months. I think we know there's businesses closing, and with all the best people in the world, we can't stop that happening. If a business has been hemorrhaging for 2 or 3 years, it's, you know, likely that this one is going to, you know, potentially take some of those businesses out. We need to be saying that this is a strategic committee. This is a committee looking forward 5, 10 years down the track. There may be some little short-term type things. I saw District Benson there. But yeah, as much as we would like this to, you know, solve all our problems and get the peninsula working and open again, I think this is more a very strategic document, working in other strategic plans with this council we haven't really had. And I know previous councillors, Fox and McLean, were very big on the fact that we didn't have a 10, 20, 30-year strategic plan. So I see this fitting into a strategic long-term plan. Whether it's going to encompass all these things, or whether we're going to say let's pick the top, you know, top 5 or whatever is sort of
Some good points. And so maybe, so part of the workshop, maybe we need to look at narrowing the scope and prioritising, as Robert said, a critical part. So let's, Lorna and.
Yeah, I just want to confirm what Martin's saying, but also don't take our off the ball of recovery. That's what we've had a hit on our budgets. The things that we promised that we aren't going to come up with for the people, they'll be looking to us to focus on getting the things that we said we're going to do done. And this is, like you say, a scaled up, longer term vision, which is good.
And I just actually reiterate Terry's point there, because in that employment and businesses, some not doing so well, some leaving, that's part of what we will talk about the recovery plan, and also so businesses is looking about diversification and changing people's way that they employ people. And that's also something that would come to the committee in terms of workforce mapping and workforce planning, and that's working with other agencies for that medium and long-term strategy about what the Coromandel can look like in terms of how we employ people, what are our industries, how we can partner better.
And Mayor's Task Force for Jobs has been identified again and again, a prime example of how councillors can work in that space. Funding's there, so, you know, it's not ratepayers funding, but we've got an opportunity to facilitate that and close that gap. Really.
Because we could go around in circles for hours really, couldn't we? So we're going to move forward with this committee, see how it goes, have a discussion online or face to face about a priority list. I think what we need to do is pass it or not, move forward. Because we're just starting to go through a whole pile of detail that needs to be written out, perhaps in the workshop setting.
So we've got a revised resolution there, battery is running slow. Did I get it, John?
Oh, you're not plugged in.
There's the one.
Oh, hang there.
So the resolution is that we receive the, we voted on that.
Yes.
Correct.
And we defer the decision to the 19th of September council meeting.
I'll move.
I'm second.
Okay, all those in favour? Those against? Carried, and Barry and the team are going to come back to us with what we can do in terms of workshopping it. In the meantime, if I can try and encourage councillors to make some notes, priorities, really important, not just priorities, but how the work that we're trying to do here can interact with the work that we're already doing as a council. And SMP is a really good example, because part of SMP is where do we build and how do we build and what do we build and how does that dovetail with what's going on in this work here. So ideas, please. Thank you.
Can I just check? In making that decision to burn, does that complicate the people doing the LTP?
Right, there's slight.
Yes.
We're going to go to executive.
So just in the interest of time, just want to check with Ari, what lunch we've got, what we'll take in for lunch. Do you want me to do it? Yeah. Yeah, exactly. So I suspect,
Working engineer.
the items of interest actually are probably going to be around our recovery and civil defence. So if I do the executive report short, and I'll just go a couple of points. So just on the three orders, we expect that legislation to be passed into law next week. And I think in the report we said not much has changed, but yesterday we did have a meeting with the mayoral forum and the iwi of the Waikato, Bay Plenty and Auckland, and they had a pretty interesting meeting. And I think at some stage we need to talk to you about what's happening in terms of starting to step up some of the governance around free waters. But perhaps that briefing is not today, but that's something we need to talk to you about in due course.
I've asked Peter to set up a Teams update for Thursday for councillors to give a bit of an update about what happened yesterday, just on Teams, so that we don't want too much time to go by before we have a chance to brief you on the substance of those meetings, because it was a lot.
Just a personal request, if it's possible, could it be moved to the afternoon on Thursday?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah. Any preference for times?
That afternoon, any time is fine.
The second item there is the resource management forms are also likely to be passed into law in the coming weeks, which means both the three orders and RM will be in legislation before the election. What happens post-election is anybody's guess at this stage, but it looks very apparent that at least some of the items that have been legislated are here to stay, and the changes upon us, I guess. Fair for Local Government report has also come out and I've just noted the bullet points there about the main themes that came through in their review and hopefully by now you will get a chance to have a look at it. The important point to note was that last week at the LGNZ conference, LGNZ agreed in the AGM to come up with, they were seeking a process to come up with a consensus view for the incoming government. But as I understand it, they ended up agreeing there may be a number of consensus positions.
Very political governing basis.
Yeah, so they have put together a group that's working through the various aspects of that too, so that they can have a view and the arise.
Can I just ask you, the national government offered them a seat at the table, like Labor's been quite proactive in building that relationship. Has that been offered on the other side?
LGNZ.
Not quite sure what the question is.
Well, they were always at a distance. They weren't really at the table with government talking a lot about, I think it's been brought a bit closer over this last 3 years, maybe.
Not sure, I'll be speculating. Lastly, our Lagoimas, you'll see, we thought we had some breathing space there with our Lagoimas, but the numbers have shot up again. And I know we've had some complaints from people coming through about us being late. We're actually not being late. We're just sort of ending up getting closer to the 20 working day limit on some of those Lagoimas. It is what it is.
Just like to apologise, of course, one of those.
Okay, yours was an easy one. And from there, I think I'll just hand over to Hayden to step you through the financials and just want you to mention particularly the waste revenue side of things, and then we'll hand over to Stephen for talking through the recovery plan. Any questions on it?
I just wonder, Ben, about this. Is it concerning that the numbers are rising? Is it something that we're feeling that we're on top of, or are we feeling like there's pressure out there that's concern?
Many of them are still hangovers from the cyclones. So somebody asked for information, they got information, they didn't like the information, and had another crack that escalated it. And certainly the names that are appearing in the Lagoina list are the same names repeatedly. And so at the end of this meeting, we'd just like to brief you about a policy that we have come into the Risk Insurance Committee about to handle those kind of repeat recidivist requesters.
In the report, one of the things that I enjoyed reading was the quite close correlation between the flash results for the end of the year to the 31st of March forecast. So what we were saying on the 31st of March is generally pretty much the way it is in most areas. And I think that's positive. However, I was surprised, given the conversation we had at the end of March about what our CapEx would be, knowing that it was the plan was 56 million, but we ended up forecasting at the end of March 42 million, and we've come in 20% lower than that, and that was a surprise. Because I can't think of any event or anything that would have meant we wouldn't be delivering on whatever it was we were planning to deliver on those 3 months. I'd be interested to hear.
Through the chair, I'll pass this to Mo, but I think the weather in the lead up to the year end didn't improve, and it was we're sorry. It was something back there, but
so that's really through the chair. Hayden's right, we obviously the weather didn't really improve, so that didn't put it a little bit. We had a few big ones where again it's just around phasing. So the Corfu project we had 1.6 million, I think, which was should have been spent the current financial year, but just based on phasing number of issues on site that's gone across, so that's quite a big amount of that. But yeah, basically it's just been a real challenge to try and get CapEx delivered. Yeah, we've just been fighting the whole way of contractors really strong as well. So things obviously get it turned around. It's got important. We've obviously spent a lot of time focusing in areas around recovery and operating and stuff. So that's been a big focus for us. So yes, that's just been a challenging time. We just haven't got through what we would like and what we've shown.
Will that 20% roll over into this next year?
So we've got a report coming to you in September regarding carry forward. So there'll be a few carry forwards to go through, definitely. Yeah, and we always like to minimise those carry forwards, but we don't want to just kind of push the other way and roll it through. But there are things that are underway and commitments made that we do need to make sure we keep delivering. So yes, so that'll come in September. We're ready for those who are waiting for the year end closes off. It's really just happening right now. Good get this meeting.
So it's sort of a relief committee, Bruce, to hear that you're looking behind on CapEx, but you are now you focused on roading and repairs that need to be done on the peninsula in the interim. So yeah, that's good with what can only be described as third world roads. I think there'll be so you focus on that now, getting the contractors in to repair those roads.
Yeah, correct. So we are in the process at the moment, and the technology and roads out in place, and the idea is that process is one that we'll use to help us with site work for a whole load of other sites around the district. But so we've got a lot of things that are all kind of stacked up. You know, all that kind of initial prep work and all the design work and the geotech takes a lot of time before you actually see things happen on the ground, but then everything should start accelerating once we get this one sorted.
Good. We're not and we're not just relying on the contract from a cabinet get free from there to go patch a hole up and other stuff like. Because it's a major concern for the group. So please you've got it in hand. It would be I see as those are as council for two reasons. One is the financial FAR, well the FRA, yeah, thank you. Funding that's only available for a little amount of time. The second one is maintaining connectivity on the Northern Peninsula for economic and social reasons. So it would be really good, Bruce, if we could get a report as to the identified sites that you're working on and the progress and the likely start dates for those.
Yeah, so we currently team is currently working on that around traffic. And so what we're doing is working with the IT team around some kind of directed traffic. So pretty simple, just like out there, put it on the app on all the different sites. Those sites are coded as to what phase they're in. So like initial investigation, geotech, preliminary design, those different kind of phases.
Yeah.
So the plan is that that presents a consolidated picture across the district, and you can click in there and have a look. So the team are busy with that at the moment.
Yeah, I'm sorry, I don't want to away from the CEO.
Go for it.
So before you carry on to Councillor Morrissey, we are really tight for time. We've got Wako Tani coming to present to us at 12:30. We're going to hear from. They're joining us for lunch. So we've also got to hear on recovery from Stephen, and we've got to hear on civil defence from Gary. So
Okay, I was going to.
we are time. Some point stuff. We dragged it a bit on the other stuff. I'll take the blame for that. So Rebecca and Agnes.
Sorry, through the chair, I just wanted to ask Bruce quickly, what's the time frame on that?
Yeah, next week or so. Yeah.
And the interactive website.
I don't know when will be done quick, but information that we have to have something out for that. Quite as easy as looking like it to them. So we're still pushing that.
Thank you.
That's just one point. Regardless, it's so crucial. I actually spoke to the CEO before about getting an eye on the audit risk committee paper so that we can actually follow progress and make sure that we're staying on track with this. There are millions and millions of dollars at stake here. There's a lot of things at stake. So, I've said it before, and I'm keen to see it really closely monitored and follow progress.
Thank you.
Just through the chair, I just really wanted to highlight something that Aileen mentioned just before. Our solid waste or bag revenue, for instance, at the moment was 1.1 million off annual plan. So
we've really seen the reduction in visitors and it cost us pretty much stayed the same. So I just want to highlight that, so it should be quite an issue, and it's probably going to go into this current financial year. Potentially, we'll have to see what happens.
Does that give us the benefit as well? Because we are seeing less rubbish, so we've got less costs.
Yes, somewhat, we've had more costs around picking it up with the roads being shut. So it's been costs around that. So I'm just trying to highlight that, a little worried about the revenue coming into 2024.
Thank you.
Talking about the fiscal hole.
Yeah, don't go there. And I'm guessing some of that spills over into recovery.
Yes and no. I guess when people look at council budgets, you'll tend to look at the costs. But what we're just giving is a wee reminder that actually there's a revenue component as well. So when the cyclones have definitely increased our costs, but the impacts of the cyclones are increasing our revenue. So the gap is bigger than it might appear if you're just looking at the costs alone. We're not as bad as some councils have been that rely heavily on user revenue, but we are impacted.
So what I'd like to do is move through this unless there's any further political discussion. So can I get a mover and a second, please, to receive the chief executive report? And John,
I just got a comment. So
It's one more. So in this extra report should be the recovery plan. So Stephen was going to speak to that. Adopt.
Oh, it's
Yeah.
part of
So it's part of
this. I'm sorry. I'm
Yeah,
sorry.
because of overarching.
Okay, so should we do that? Thank you, Hayden and Stephen.
my quick question,
Sure.
it's just a quick one, around page 143, and it was just the passing reserves favourable due to the Thames sub-regional aquatic facilities having a scope change. I just wonder if that means, are they having a replanning or what's going on there? Can you give me some detail around that?
Page, through the chair, what page is that? Sorry?
143. Just a commentary at the bottom of the page.
Through the chair, through the gone on to do some additional work to look at different sites, so some sites down Hauraki, cover off that kind of slightly waste joke. So if we wanted to go to sub-regional across other regions, we need to look at some of the other sites.
Right.
So yes,
So just looking elsewhere.
bit of work for that.
Okay,
So
thank you.
further down the line.
Thank you.
So what we're looking at doing is, and I'm sorry to mess you around, Stephen, is maybe deferring Stephen's recovery report until after lunch. Gary, are you saying that you're happy to do that, or you will?
I think we need a little bit of time to wish it, so we have a combined report, so.
Okay, so we've got lunch, then walk to Kotahi, and if it's all right with you, we'll do that after lunch. Councillors happy with that?
Yep.
Yes.
Okay. We'll adjourn for lunch and then reconvene at 1 o'clock. It's before. Thank you.